Candace Anderson and Gene Erickson, a couple from Texas, drove off a country road when the ignition switch on their Saturn Ion failed, tearing through a briar patch and colliding with a tree. Gene was killed, and Candace's legs were pinned under the car for an hour. General Motors eventually linked 13 deaths, including the accident in Texas, to the ignition defect. In 2014, GM recalled over 2.6 million cars due to the faulty ignition switches, which could shut off the engine during driving and prevent airbags from inflating. The fault had been known to GM for over a decade. GM approved the switches in 2002, even though they knew it might not meet safety standards. There are many reasons why executives at GM might not have taken proper action. One reason has to do with human overconfidence, a type of egocentric bias, which is just like it sounds, the unwarranted belief in one's own decision prowess. However, you don't have to be a GM exec to fall prey to the overconfidence bias. The fact is, most people are wildly overconfident about their decision-making abilities. Let me give you some facts. 94% of college professors believe they are above average teachers. 90% of drivers believe they are above average. When executives are given quizzes about their industry, they estimate they get 5% wrong. In fact, they get 80% wrong. One study found that Wall Street traders believed they were very successful in manipulating a Bloomberg-like terminal that was in fact displaying random data. They saw patterns and cause-effect relationships that are just not there. Unfortunately, the biases that leaders and managers hold can wreak havoc on their teams. Let's talk about 5 biases and how to neutralize them. The framing effect. Let me ask you a question. Would you rather have $5,000 for sure or a 50-50 chance of making $10,000? Most people prefer the sure $5,000. Even though the two options have the same objective value, most people would rather have the sure thing. The fact that we prefer the sure thing suggests that most people are risk averse. We'd rather have a sure thing rather than a risk. Okay, so what? Let's turn this example on its head. Suppose you could choose to lose $5,000 for sure, or accept a 50-50 chance of losing nothing or $10,000. What would you choose? Remember, you're being forced. Most people choose the gamble even though the objective value of both options are the same. This reveals risk-seeking behavior. According to Nobel laureate Danny Kahneman, most decision makers are risk-averse when it comes to good things, making money, saving lives, but are risk-seeking when it comes to negative things. This may seem like a harmless quirk of human behavior, but the framing effect means you can be easily manipulated or manipulate others. For example, suppose I want to introduce a change initiative in my team. I am best advised to present the opportunity as avoiding a sure loss. Conversely, suppose I like the status quo in my company and change is very upsetting to me. To get people to be risk-averse, I need to present the options as a keep the status quo and make gains versus take a big risk for possibly more gains. Confirmation bias is essentially the tendency for people to seek information that confirms what they want to believe. Again, this sounds harmless until we take a case like the financial crisis of 2008. In 2008, America was celebrating. The economy was booming. Everybody seemed to be getting wealthier, even though the warning signs were everywhere. Too much borrowing, foolish investments, greedy banks, regulators asleep at the wheel, politicians eager to promote home ownership for those who couldn't afford it, and distinguished analysts openly predicting this could only end badly. And then, when Lehman Brothers fell, the financial system froze and the world economy almost collapsed. Why? The problem at the core was the fact that leaders turned a blind eye to signs and signals that they didn't want to see. Decision fatigue. Did you know that the very act of making decisions produces fatigue? However, unlike physical exertion, where we know we are tired, leaders are often unaware that they are mentally fatigued and they become organizationally dangerous. What's an example? In one investigation, people who made a series of choices regarding consumer products and college courses performed worse, had lower pain tolerance, and were less persistent than people who did not make a series of decisions. For this reason, truly effective leaders know their limits. This means they get out their calendars at the beginning of the week and figure out what meetings, what decisions, what judgment calls need to be made, and they get ready for those moments. They don't waste time sweating the small stuff because they want to be ready for the big stuff. By the way, did you know that President Obama never makes decisions about what to wear or what to eat? Obama is well aware of decision fatigue, and he wants to be mentally fresh. The team scaling fallacy. As team size increases, people increasingly underestimate the number of labor hours required to complete the project. Did you know that most projects are delivered late and over budget? The remedy is to base forecasts on milestones, not the entire project, and factor in obstacles. The common information effect is the tendency for groups to discuss information that they all have in common, rather than unique information. Let me give you an example. Jim Larson and his colleagues examined how real doctors make patient diagnoses. Medical teams were more likely to discuss information they all knew about the patient as opposed to information that they uniquely held. And when critical information about the patient was distributed among the medical team, the likelihood of an accurate diagnosis plummeted by nearly 30%. When Larson looked at the videotapes, he discovered that the teams had a bias toward discussing information, clues, and assumptions they had in common. They were much less likely to discuss information they were uniquely aware of. The remedy is to suspend initial judgment, consider the alternatives one at a time, and find out who has information that is not shared by all group members. Okay, let's sum up. Think about a decision you are making or facing right now: leaving your job, buying a company, starting a new venture. Here are 4 action steps. First, build in tests of disconfirmation. What could prove you wrong? Reward team members for providing controversial data. 2, set up policies in advance of obtaining outcomes. 3, bring in outsiders to evaluate, but don't tell them your preferred course of action. Finally, turn off the email inbox so you're not tempted to divert your attention or make trivial decisions before facing a big decision.